given thought to the concept of cumulative impacts, is there a way of managing? Is there a limit that can be set? Just thinking about it, kind of thinking about it from the point of view of applicants, and each of the applicants is a separate company. SSEN is separate from NATARA, separate from the various other companies that might be applying for wind farm development. So from their point of view, it makes sense to look at the effects of their wind farm rather than the whole thing. Is there a system, or is there a view you have on how limits might be set in that kind of incremental development?
Yes, I think I mentioned it earlier. It's called programme management, which is totally absent from what's happening on Skye. We have several projects happening, and if I could just talk a bit about the Skye reinforcement project for a moment, because obviously Ben Aketil repowering, in a sense, relies upon an enlarged reinforced grid. I've got here the original September 2016 consultation paper that SSEN put out for the replacement of the overhead power line, which is about 200 metres up the road from where I live in Broadford. No mention of new substations. There was mentions of a bit of tweaking, which makes sense because they're reaching the end of their operational life. But the reality is now, it's gone from 2016, the replacement of an ageing overhead power line, to a much beefier power line to accommodate the prospect of several wind farms on Skye being enlarged and plugged into this new strengthened grid. That was never discussed way back in the teens. It first appeared as a prospect when SSEN came a-calling around about 2021, 22, when they was talking about, well, it's to do with we're going to have to underground so much more of the cabling around the Coolmans. We needed the new big substations to balance the grid properly. I don't think that was the case. I think it was the case that during the pandemic years, there's been a sea change in terms of policy. The current Scottish Government energy strategy is dated 2017. It has never been updated. I know the UK government has reviewed their energy strategy in 2022. Surprisingly, the Scottish government seems not to have taken the opportunity to do its own brand version of that, which it normally does with anything that comes out of Westminster. Let's do our own brand version. And the other thing, which is very, very missing in terms of how we as communities hold ministers to account, hold the planners to account, hold the developers to account, as we're told ad nauseum about just transition. Show me the just transition. There was an extensive consultation about just transition from the Scottish Government. They wrapped it up, then they extended the consultation a bit further into September 23, I think, as I recall. Since when silence? When I contacted the Scottish Government through my MSP to explain why do we still have no just transition strategy, the response was a very lame one. It was, oh well, it's the picture's so constantly evolving, it's very difficult to pin it down. Well, that's precisely why you need to have a just transition, so we can benchmark what's being done to us.
But in terms of development on Skye in particular, do you have a view on what the limit would be in terms of cumulative?
Programme management. The Ben Aketil planning documentation has a very detailed technical swept path analysis from the harbour at Kyle all the way over the bridge, the A87, the A63, which Hell fishermen have called the A36 for some reason. And that gives a very detailed explanation of how much road furniture is going to have to be moved, how many trees are going to have to be cut down. That's the sort of information that needs to be shared between all developers, so they only have to do this sort of thing once, because as we found out in April, May, when they did some tree trimming along the A87 between the Skye Bridge and Ashake Airfield, there was 3 weeks of road chaos and long delays, and that was just to do with tree trimming. That was not to do with removing light lampposts or removing safety barriers or removing road signage. So there are things like that where there needs to be a more program management. I don't know, before I retired, it was called program management. It might have a different name now, I don't know. But I suppose it's joining up action. The other example there would be around the borrow pits and the movement of stone and rock by HGVs to and fro. Every project seems to have its own individual transport project plan. There doesn't seem to be any concept of, could we make better use of this? Because at the moment we're just going to have HGVs running hither and thither, half of them empty, half of them full, and it's not going to be very clear where they're coming from or where they're going to. It could be changed, but it's just this absence of an overarching strategic grid that gives me quite a lot of concern.
Thank you.
Okay.
This is Nick Ferguson.
Sorry, I don't know if you heard that. My next witness is Nick Ferguson.
Just when you're ready.
Good evening. Sir, ladies, gentlemen, councillors, friends, my name is Nick Ferguson. I'm not a social media influencer. I'm not a YouTuber. I'm not a vlogger. I'm not a keyboard warrior. I'm a professional dry stone waller. I'm a shareholding crofter, keep Hebridean sheep and presently a couple of Shetland cattle. I'm also a recreational sea kayaker, and it's in this respect that I want to address the bulk of my comments, and I believe it's certainly pertinent considering today's proceedings. I've known Skye since the mid-1980s, long before the bridge, long before Ben Aketil wind farm, and long before the mass tourism that has transformed the economy of this island. Less than a generation ago, everyone living and visiting Skye had a perspective of the island from the sea. A generation later, since the completion of the bridge in 1996, people's perspective of Skye is primarily from the inside of a motor vehicle. Particularly where, in the case of the reporter, your chosen path includes the township bull. Such an outlook is physically contained and restricted unless you leave your vehicle or travel the seas around Skye. There has undoubtedly been a reduction in seafaring since the advent of the bridge. However, there remain a significant number of residents and visitors who use the sea to go about their business or leisure. Those folk have a very different view of the island than that gained from a vehicle. The Isle of Skye is a unique landscape within the United Kingdom. The extremes of sea level, on Mountain Ridge, which I hope our reporter will be able to experience for himself. The extremes of sea level and mountain ridge and summits are the best vantage points to understand that uniqueness. It was the mountains that brought me to Skye back in the 1980s. However, it is the sea that has become my principal means of recreation. I'm a regular sea kayaker, both individually and more often as a leader and coach with the South Skye and Lochoush Kayak Club. And it is in this respect that I feel it necessary to place on record the potential impact of this and other proposed wind energy developments planned for Skye. The current wind turbines at Ben Aketil and Aidenbane are already visible from many locations around the island. The proposed increase in heights will only add to that number of locations. However, unique landscapes are no longer unique if they are viewed through a screen of wind turbines. Likewise, the point of focus in such landscapes, warranting the designation of National Scenic Area, SLA, SCA, like the Coolin, like Loch Bracadale, should not be industrial structures such as proposed at Ben Aketil. From the sea, one can view a far greater landscape than available from a car, a cumulative perspective. For example, Loch Bracadale on the west coast is undoubtedly one of the scenic highlights of any tour of Skye. I would contend that the vista from Loch Bracadale is even more impressive from on the loch itself. Not only are you viewing a landscape of breathtaking beauty and scale, but you are also viewing multiple sites of historic importance to Skye. A historic landscape environment, to borrow a phrase from MPF4. Duns, caves, brock, cairns, churches, and not forgetting the most obvious footprint of all, the crofting landscape of Runrigs, Shearlings and Byres. Industrial developments such as Ben Aketil repowering have no problem quantifying the monetary and material cost of such work. The landscape is silent and passive. The sea is not always silent and it's rarely passive. Yet someone must try and quantify the value of these assets. Some of us still value a perspective of the land from the sea. When viewed from the sea, such developments form a part of the whole that cannot be seen from the development looking out. Some impositions on the landscape will quickly mask what is unique about Skye and deny that benefit for future generations. This is a local public inquiry. Although this is a local public inquiry, it has clear ramifications for how we apply the principles and therefore achieve the objectives of our National Spatial Strategy 2045, as detailed in MPF4. So I don't know if you're familiar with any of the literature generated by this region. I'd like to close with a couple of lines taken from the Frayed Atlantic Edge by David Grange, published in 2019. He reminds us that clearances, etc., are all part of the same process in which diverse geographical concerns have been disciplined out of national life, with the wealth of the urban inland centre subsuming and consuming not just all resources, but all attention. The gull in the storm evokes the impossible odds against which islanders have fought in the, excuse me, the gull in the storm evokes the impossible odds against which islanders have fought in a political system structured to mainland needs and the profits of landlords rather than land dwellers. Thank you.
If I could just ask you one question. I just wanted to understand what reaction is to the presently existing is that not? I just wanted to understand what your reaction is to the presently existing chairman in Aketil and the other ones that are visible from Loch Aketil. As someone seeing it from the perspective of the sea.
What struck me from today's proceedings is that we're all talking about landscape perspectives, and we're talking about perspectives from the east and the west and the north. Nobody's yet spoken about the perspective from the south. And, you know, I'll take one example. This summer, the famous the only paddle steamer left, the Waverley, did a maiden voyage to Carbos, where those wind farms was visible all the time when she got around to Loch Harport and Bracadale. They dominate the skyline. You cannot avoid them. So if they're there and they are to be repowered in the case of Ben Aketil, then, as several other contributors have made clear already, what contribution are they making to Sky? And I know what contribution they're making to the private equity partners based in the Cayman Islands. That's, what was it, £51 million in profit distributions. That's a good return. Their contribution to Sky has been less than 1% of its turnover. We are not seeing the benefits of these structures. And in terms of Ben Aketil and the related infrastructures that are proposed for Sky, what is lacking here, as other speakers have spoken about, is a complete lack of strategic direction from government level. This is a free market free-for-all based on basic neoliberal economics of where can they get away with this with the least possible opposition. That's what we're dealing with here.
Thank you. That was my own question.
Thank you very much, Nick. So thank you. The next witness is Rona Coogan.
Good evening, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. I do have a few additional remarks following my written submission. Will that be all right to add on to the end?
Well, generally speaking, it would be as long as it's
I'll keep it concise.
clear.
Yeah, okay. I'll read my initial statement first. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your time. It's getting late now. My name is Rona Coogan. I am a Skiarnach. That means a sky person, born and bred. I am also a mother and a small business owner in the south of Skye. Having grown up in Breckish, a small township in the south of Skye, I grew up, for a little bit of context, one of 6 children in a very cramped croft house, although we were not deemed crofters. I do believe that residents from this area have a right to protect the place that they choose to call home from destruction from external forces. This destruction is pressing down on us in the form of lucrative business ventures from international corporations looking to extract as much money as possible from their industrial ventures in this area, whilst irreversibly scarring our beloved landscape for generations to come. I'd like to continue. When I began opposing Skye's industrialisation, including the repowering of Ben Aketil, I was concerned about the long-term effects on future generations, including my 18 nieces and nephews who live locally. At that time, I did not yet have any children of my own. Now my partner, Salvatore, who is Italian, and I have a son, Cameron, who is 1 year old and is a part of this community that I wish to protect from this invasion. As a family living in a rural township, Breckish, located on the verges of the crumbling A87, if these industrial projects are granted, we will face increased traffic from hundreds to thousands of abnormal indivisible load vehicles, AILVs. The influx of construction materials, aggregates, turbine components, and worker traffic will heavily impact our daily lives. With one main trunk road, yes, I reiterate, one main trunk road through the Isle of Skye, the A87, all project traffic will rely on this route. The danger that this will cause to the communities along these verges is unacceptable. I walk my infant in his pram every day, and I can confirm that the state of this main road is extremely poor. There is hardly clearance either side of the carriageway, and certainly no pavement. This is why I believe it is unacceptable to have large loads hurtling through our neighbourhoods. We have a right to raise our families safely. For those of you unfamiliar with rural life, let's also consider a routine trip to the dentist in Portree, 29 miles from Breckish, via the A87. Normally a 40-minute journey, it takes 1 hour in summer due to tourist traffic. Additional construction traffic for Ben Aketil, plus other mentioned large-scale energy projects, will make day-to-day outings like this a nightmare. The combination of industrial projects and overlapping construction timelines will result in gridlock. This will have devastating consequences for local communities. Simple tasks like school runs, supermarket trips, doctor's visits, workplace commutes, running a business, or essential assistance from the emergency services will become at best compromised, or in the worst case, impossible. Last December, tragically, a fatal accident closed the A87 for half a day, causing traffic to come to a standstill. This highlights the need for greater cumulative impact assessments. Skye's A87, also key in connecting to the Outer Hebrides ferry routes, cannot handle all of this heavy construction traffic without compromising the day-to-day existence of our communities here. Individual developers are responsible for the construction of the Skye overhead line, the wind farms, the battery storage parks, both new substations at Broadford and Edinburgh. There are also large workers' camps and borrowquits or quarries linked to all of these projects. However, the lack of coordination between these companies will lead to significant problems. Even someone, an opera singer by trade, without engineering or logistics expertise can see that undertaking these projects simultaneously under various developers is a disastrous idea. There is serious potential that this may lead to depopulation, as families find it quite unbearable to live under these conditions in a new, unrecognisable lifestyle. Furthermore, despite claims of being renewable, these industrial wind farms harm natural landscapes and pose long-term issues. Often, initial investors sell the sites upon achieving their financial return, and we lose the promise to dismantle the components. Similar issues have been experienced in communities in America and across the world. Research indicates significant health concerns associated with living near wind turbines, collectively termed wind turbine syndrome. The proposed Ben Aketil wind farm may adversely affect the health of residents in Dunvegan, Edinburgh and nearby areas along the A850 and A863. This is a serious concern for my family and I. We know that turbines are made with toxic bisphenol A, BPA, used in polycarbonate plastics and epoxy resins. As turbine blades erode, they release BPA and microplastics into the environment, potentially causing, among other things, endocrine issues, fertility problems, and cancer. The harsh weather conditions on Skye, such as heavy rain and strong winds, accelerate this erosion, worsening contamination of local environments and water supplies. Wildfires frequently occur in the Highland hillsides. These are known in Gaelic as fallishkers. If these fires happen near wind farms or substations, the results will be toxic fumes endangering both local people and wildlife. Malfunctioning wind turbines can also start fires. Our small fire brigades are simply not equipped to handle these large-scale fires, and we are too far from cities to simply call on these specialist emergency services. Pouring concrete into peatlands is ecologically harmful and will have severe consequences. Large concrete slabs for turbine bases will alter natural rainfall absorption, leading to flash flooding. This exacerbates current road issues and allows the poisonous BPA to reach local villages and water supplies and later enter the sea through rivers and streams. As we have seen in Shetland, in certain situations, the peatland has begun to slide down the hill, causing danger to the villages that lie below. Having grown up on this island and lived here for most of my life, I find it ludicrous that the environment, the culture, and the well-being of the residents can be so easily forsaken. We are not unreasonable people. In fact, I would say we are very reasonable people. The voices of the residents are being ignored because of the insatiable greed of the few. The concealed scoping taking place by external forces is reminiscent of the Highland clearances, when a lack of consideration, respect, and accessible information for the local communities resulted in a disastrous conclusion. They are preying, the developers, on the naivety and trusting nature of Highland communities. I would like to add here, very sadly, if Skye does become an industrial wasteland, I will begrudgingly have to look to find an alternative place to raise my young family. Living here, I know the land. I know the prevailing wind. I get to feel it every day. It is the same wind that whistles through the trees in my garden. I know where the sun rises and where the sun sets. I know the moon cycle and the patterns of the tides. I get to witness the wild animals and birds going about their daily routines. We respect the nature around us. It is a privilege to witness all of this. And that is why I live here, unlike the global giants who are forcing themselves upon us. It is absurd to approve all large-scale neighbouring industrial developments on a one-by-one basis. There must be a strategic overview. The cumulative effect of the Skye reinforcement line, followed by the excessive number of wind farms plus associated projects, will be crippling to the island's communities and the existing economy. The Scottish Government must do better, or be forever accountable for inviting industrial predators to irreversibly deface this island and the entire country, visually, environmentally, and economically. Thank you. Could I add those additional points?
Yes, yes, please.
Thank you. I would just like to say initially, the mental strain on individuals involved in campaigning in such major projects, against such major projects as this, is overwhelming. It breaks family life, it breaks jobs, it ruins our businesses, it makes us struggle in our relationships. And this is a 24/7 job. That was my first point. My second point. As another voluntary position I hold, I am a member of the local community council. Due to this, I recently attended the convention of community councils in Bewley 10 days ago, where we tried to find the much needed solution for our voices not being heard by the Scottish Government. If I may, I would like to share the unified statement that came out from this gathering. I would like to add that the gathering featured 53 community council representatives from across the Highlands, and the greater number of people that they represent is over 70,000 members of the Scottish Highlands. The statement, organised by Councillor Helen Crawford, reads as following. This convention, supported by over 50 community councils, collectively represents over 72,000 residents within the Highland Council area, recognises the impact of climate change on our planet, but opposes an unjust and unnecessarily industrialisation of the Highlands, calls for our elected members to urgently support and protect our communities at national level, given that community consultation is inadequate and local democracy is being overridden, with decisions made by community councils and Highland Council consistently disregarded by the Scottish Government. Calls upon the Scottish Government to undertake a planning inquiry commission to address the whole cumulative impact of all major renewable energy infrastructure developments, including transmission, storage and generation, with all ancillary infrastructure on our communities and landscape, rather than the